Children are vanishing from locked cars without a trace. A toddler scales a 1,400-foot cliff. A baby disappears from a sealed vehicle. A boy is found dead in snow, surrounded by mysterious tracks. What's snatching these kids from safety? Stick around, the final clue will shatter everything you think you know. If you leave now, you'll never learn the terrifying truth behind these cases. On the morning of October 16, 1930, the Nevada desert was silent. A vast, open nothingness stretched across the horizon, and the only sound came from the crunch of tires over hard-packed sand. John Sullivan, a seasoned gold prospector, drove deeper into the arid heart of the landscape with his 3-year-old nephew, Lawrence Sullivan, seated beside him. They were 150 miles from Reno, far from civilization, with no roads to guide them. Just raw wilderness, steep ridgelines, and the dreams of buried treasure that had led John out here in the first place. John's destination was a specific valley obscured by a tall hill. There was no way to drive to it. He stopped the vehicle at the end of a makeshift path, parked it, and turned to Lawrence. He told him, gently but firmly, to stay in the car. He locked the doors and began his climb over the hill. As he ascended, he turned back once. Lawrence looked directly at him and waved. John smiled and waved back. The moment was clear, conscious, full of intent. The boy knew where his uncle was going. When John returned just a few minutes later, the car door was ajar. Lawrence was gone. Panic clawed its way into John's throat. He shouted his nephew's name, over and over, pacing the barren ground. The desert, with its wide, unbroken views and unforgiving silence, gave him nothing back. There were no trees for cover, no hiding places, no footprints in the dry, compacted earth. Only Lawrence's small hat lay a short distance from the vehicle, as though it had been deliberately placed, or perhaps snatched away. As nightfall approached and temperatures threatened to plummet below freezing, John made the heart-wrenching decision to leave. He drove frantically to the nearest town, more than an hour away, and returned with help. The sheriff's department initiated a massive search operation. But even with men scouring the landscape, not a single track, human, animal, or otherwise, could be found. After 4 days, desperation turned surreal. Newspapers ran with outlandish theories. Some speculated that an eagle might have carried Lawrence away. It was implausible, and yet somehow more believable than the idea that he had simply disappeared. Eventually, in a last effort to make sense of the impossible, authorities called in a Native American tracker, revered for his skills in reading the land. The man picked up a faint trace, almost invisible, and followed it. The trail twisted and meandered over miles of rocky terrain, and then it climbed. It climbed 7 miles from the car, and then up the face of a sheer cliff 1,400 feet into the air. At the top, nestled in a small rocky ledge, they found Lawrence Sullivan alive, more or less unharmed. He was curled under a tree, asleep, and draped beneath a branch that had wrapped around his neck in such a way that if he had moved too suddenly, it might have broken him. The officers who retrieved him said it looked like a trap. Lawrence was scratched but otherwise fine. But how a 3-year-old had made that impossible journey, 7 miles across unforgiving wilderness and straight up a cliff wall that required climbing gear, remains one of the great mysteries of Missing 411. Then came the case of Jimmy Duffy, a fragile 2-year-old boy whose disappearance would spark intense scrutiny and heartbreak. It was October 19, 1973, and James and Carol Duffy, along with their 2 children, Jimmy and Natalie, set out for a relaxing camping trip in Lake Wenatchee, Washington. Their RV camper was parked near the shore, a serene backdrop for what was supposed to be a peaceful escape from city life. But the calm shattered like glass on a quiet lake. Jimmy and Natalie were both asleep in the locked camper, along with the family's 2 cats. Carol and James, keeping the vehicle within eyesight, took a brief walk down the shoreline, never straying more than a few hundred feet. James returned to check on the kids. Everything was fine. The children were asleep, the cats undisturbed. He stepped back out, waved to Carol, and joined her. They hadn't been together for more than 5 minutes when they heard a scream. It came from the direction of the camper. They sprinted back. The door was open, Jimmy was gone. Natalie and the 2 cats were still inside, still asleep. But the boy had vanished. In the span of minutes, from a locked vehicle, a search party descended on the area. Police, canines, helicopters. The park was remote and sparsely populated, and every camper was accounted for. Every alibi was confirmed. No one had seen anything. Jimmy was gone, and there wasn't a single footprint leading away from the camper. The police grew suspicious of the parents. They were questioned, subjected to polygraph tests, and passed. Friends and family insisted James and Carol adored their children. Moreover, Jimmy had always been frail. He was not a child who could easily wander off into the woods, let alone go undetected in a full-scale search. Eventually, the investigation yielded nothing. The search was called off, and the Duffy family was left hollowed out by a mystery that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Another girl would vanish from a locked vehicle, only to return under baffling circumstances. In the quiet suburbs of Tennessee on March 26, 1962, the Crawford family had returned from a late-night visit to the doctor. Their 1-year-old daughter had taken ill, and they had brought along their 3-year-old daughter, Faye, for the ride. When they pulled into their driveway, Faye was sound asleep in the back seat. Not wanting to wake her, Mr. and Mrs. Crawford decided to bring the baby in first. The car doors were locked behind them, the windows rolled up tight. They were only gone a few minutes. When they returned, Faye was gone. The car remained sealed. Both doors were shut and locked. The interior handles had been broken for months. A child could not have used them to open the doors. The only way out would have required Faye to crawl between the seats, roll down the window, reach outside to the handle, open the door, escape, roll the window back up, manually relock the door, and shut it behind her. Not only had she never managed such a feat, she had never even unbuckled her own seat belt before. And yet, the car was undisturbed. But the child had vanished. Police searched the area with urgency, knowing snow was on its way. Temperatures dropped overnight. Hours passed. No sign, no trail. Then, the next morning, a miracle or something like it occurred. 3 miles away, Faye walked barefoot onto a stranger's property. She was mostly unharmed, wearing the same clothes, her feet raw and scratched. She had somehow crossed 3 miles of dense forest in freezing temperatures in the middle of the night. Experts noted that most children, especially at that age, do not keep walking at night. They lie down, they sleep. Faye didn't. She walked straight through the darkness, and she never said a word about it. Every time someone asked her what had happened, she simply smiled. The investigation stayed open, not because anyone thought foul play was involved, but because logic had evaporated. Nothing about her reappearance made sense. Then came Paul Weymouth and the boy named Gage. Salt Lake City was where Paul called home. He was a construction worker, twice divorced, and the single father of 5 children. His youngest son, Gage Weymouth, was 2 years old and had become Paul's constant companion. On October 25, 2001, Paul took Gage on a drive into a private, gated deer hunting area. Only registered members could access the land, and Paul had the code. They passed through the gate, locked it behind them, and drove deeper into the woods. Paul parked near a ridge and noticed that Gage was fast asleep in his car seat. The decision he made next would haunt him forever. He chose not to wake Gage. The boy looked peaceful, safe. Paul locked the vehicle and stepped away to scout for deer. Some distance away, other hunters flagged him down, and he got distracted. About half an hour later, he returned. The truck door was open. Gage was gone. Paul's panic turned to hysteria. He screamed for help, collapsing, vomiting from the shock. A massive search began. Authorities combed the area, but the gated property had strict access. No one could have entered or exited without the code. Paul was cleared. The other hunters were interrogated. Nothing. For days passed. The trail was cold. Paul's church organized an extension of the search and brought in more volunteers. One of them was James Wilkes, a skilled outdoorsman who brought along his dog, Dino. While searching, James became lost. The irony was brutal. In an attempt to find a lost child, James himself wandered too far and ended up miles from the designated area. That night, Snow fell, and temperatures plummeted. James and Dino huddled under a tree, unsure if they would survive the night. As the sun rose, they pressed forward. Dino stopped abruptly and began licking the ground. Under the snow, James uncovered the lifeless body of Gage Weymouth. James, devastated, carried Gage for hours until he reached a familiar fence. There, exhausted, he placed the boy's body next to a post and found his way to search headquarters. James was investigated, polygraphed, cleared. He described strange tracks around Gage's body. Canine-like, not Dino's. He had never been in that spot before. The presence of those tracks begged more questions than answers. Why hadn't dogs found Gage earlier? Who or what had been there? An autopsy ruled the cause of death was hypothermia. Paul was broken beyond repair. He built a shrine at the site. He returned often, sitting alone in his car, trying to understand. How had his son gotten out of the locked vehicle? Why had the search failed? What had he missed? Authorities, perhaps needing to place blame, charged Paul with negligence. He pled guilty and received a 30-day sentence. He didn't live long enough to serve it. Paul eliminated himself, and that death was perhaps the final echo of the scream that had begun when Gage disappeared. For children, for locked vehicles, for impossible vanishings, each child either recovered in a place they should never have reached, or never found again, or returned under circumstances that defy all explanation. These are not isolated stories. These are the mysteries cataloged by former detective David Paulides, who has spent years chronicling such baffling disappearances in his Missing 411 series. What binds them is not just loss, but the utter collapse of logic. Vanishings without footprints, reappearances in deadly terrain, children slipping away in the blink of an eye. Whatever is happening, it is beyond what the mind can hold. Whether it's coincidence, a flaw in our understanding of nature, or something darker and unnameable, the truth is buried. Just like Lawrence on the mountain ledge, just like Jimmy in the woods, just like Gage beneath the snow, and just like Faye behind her smile. Drop your wildest theories below. Do you think it's predators, paranormal forces, or something even darker? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because the next mystery might be even more unsettling.